Hello, Andrej. It's nice to see you today for our online discussion. Somehow traditional discussion. We continue this activity with different scholars, academicians from different countries, and our discussion sometimes, not sometimes, but in every case is focused on some particular topic. For example, as for today, I hope that we will focus not only on general issues in education, related to education, but also on some specific issues related to your area of interest, in particular biology education. And I want to introduce shortly you to our channel viewers. Today we have Professor Andrej Šorgo from University of Maribor in Slovenia, and Professor Andrej, as possible, he will introduce in more details himself, but anyway, he works at Faculty of Natural Sciences and Mathematics at the mentioned university, and his area of interest is so wide. At least I found on internet, not on internet, because I know Andrej personally for many years, and his skills and expertise is really large, including, for example, as I mentioned, biology as the main area, and statistical analysis, quantitative methods in research, teaching, obviously, higher education, academic writing, biotechnology, etc., etc., etc. So large area of interest. And possible, Andrej, please, you can add something interesting.
No, you said almost everything to be said. I really like to introduce myself to the others as a curious teacher of the teachers. And what to say, and in this work in teacher education, in the first part, when I still worked at secondary school, I have to self-educate myself, and now I'm trying to transfer some issues I found very heavy during these early times to the others. It means how to be or to stay curious, and how to present findings to the others. That's all. But because the world is changing, for example, we are in the words of Cuban, I like this. In the education, we are all the time reforming something what was already reformed. So in the name of well-known revolutionaries from the past, education can be regarded as a continuous revolution. And I want to be a part of this revolution, and that's about me. I can say I really like to work with people, with a lot of them, and that's a big point. Make a lot of fun. Finding another experts and so on. So that's on short about me. But if I have to describe myself in 3-4 words, the leading keyword will be curiosity.
Okay, it's obviously somehow for us, generally for people who works in academic activities as scholars, as researchers, curiosity is like engine, like the most important thing, obviously. And anyway, we are not maybe directly professional in education systems, but you as a representative of Slovenia, it would be nice to know something from the first words directly about the education system in your country, in Slovenia. I remember, for example, let's say two decades ago, at least before 2000, before millennium. I remember that in Lithuania we discussed a lot about Slovenia. Slovenia usually was introduced like good example about different reforms in education, as you mentioned. It's really permanent activity to perform different reforms, and possible we will discuss a little bit later, for example, mainly in relation to STEAM education, because it's so burning issue, not new, not something revolutionary, but anyway, this is now on the top. And just in a few words, just like your impression, for example, what is education system in Slovenia today? Can you briefly describe it in a few words?
Just educational system in Slovenia follows the basic rules of all such educational systems, starting with preschool education, continues with primary, continuing with lower secondary, which is integrated in 9-year compulsory or basic schools, which is, let's say, compulsory to all. It's completely free of charge and so on. Continues in different streams, general education, where with the end of this general maturas state exam, which is a prerequisite to enter university, about somewhere 35% of students finishing elementary school goes to these general streams. Okay, to be more precise, it is also divided in different subtypes, like art school, technical gymnasium, general gymnasium, humanistic gymnasium, but it's all the streams can finish with the same matura, and then comes a number of 2 to 5 years professional and vocational programs, and then is tertiary education in different levels, from higher to universities and etc. So what to say about these lower levels, let's say primary and secondary? They are subject of changes at the moment. Everything is changing, like syllabi, what can state the same. It's the basic structure. Nobody's talking about leaving 9 to year elementary, continuous with 2 to 5 years secondary. This is out of the scope. However, there are some issues like early introduction of second or first foreign languages, following, let's say, we are following Europe in these declarations and whatever is recommendation, and about these basic principles like communication and so on. And I can say the trend, maybe I don't like the trend too much, because I believe that I believe that they try to make education a little, let's say, softer. Because we were before we have, let's say, very strict system with a lot of topics and so on. And then in somewhere in 90s or a little bit later, they make an idea that about 30% of the goals should be dropped out of syllabi. Okay, they were dropped, and after that, we simply can recognize, okay, the school stays the same, with all known problems and some new emerging, like these new technologies and so on. But I'm not going to talk about this. And now the trend is to reduce number of let's say learning goals, but I'm not sure if it will work. That's it. And now, as almost all, we are struggling with technology and with introduction of some buzzwords like, let's say, what does it mean, green education, for example. I'm not completely sure what...
A lot of modern words, modern terms, and for example, just before our discussion, I shortly searched online different interesting things. And for example, our university next month in May, not our academy in Šiauliai, because we are branch now, but in Vilnius University, International Scientific Practical Conference will take place, and the title is, just I will read the title of this conference: Educational Policy and Cultural Transformations, Teacher Training and School Creation in the Anthropocene Era. Oh my God, this is Anthropocene Era, and this is explanation, for example, that Anthropocene Era is the change to the planet caused by human activities such as over-intensive agriculture, industrialization, deforestation, nuclear pollution, and pollution of the oceans and skies, etc., etc. The future of society and solutions to global challenges are directly related to the future of general education. It sounds nice, but sometimes I'm thinking that we're discussing about only some fashionable things, but not about...
No, I will say we can go because it's a part of, let's say, environmental education, coming with different titles after they like goals and so on. So, however, I believe that we should go to the O's. And education, right? The first part of education is that someone should learn about something. Now, let's say, okay, learn about something. What is this? What should be learned? Right? Who can say at this moment, for example, when we introduced, let's say, curricula for digital education in different names like informatics and so on, who was able to predict, for example, emergence of chat GTP, for example? Now it's a new player in the field, and I believe it's a really strong player. Okay, and then the other question is, I always heard something like this: oh, they will never need this. Most of the things you are never going to use. That's true. But you at least you should know about them to allow you orientation. For example, let's say, okay, if you don't know about mitochondria, you cannot ask nothing about mitochondria. And if you don't know about something that exists, you cannot search for this on Google or wherever, whatever engine you are using. Now, the second level is learning with something. So, students, by my opinion, should get first-hand experiences, but they cannot get experiences with future solutions, future technologies. For example, we cannot predict now. Okay, now we are talking over the internet. For example, such for example, if someone from outside is going to film this, it will be in the 50s, it will be science fiction. Now, we used online courses and so on. So, teaching with, and then is teaching for. And what we can see? We can see acceptance of the changes. For example, and I believe that I have more problems to forget something what are obviously wrong, what was learned before. And about just about a term of Anthropocene. It's established term. It's okay, like Holocene or Oligocene or whatever Cene is, and Anthropocene, a new name of one recent geological formation or whatever is the right term. So, but I believe that we are all the time forgetting this teaching for, and in this case, I'm in this old-fashioned teacher. This let's say old-fashioned teacher, recognizing let's say a central role of the teacher in the classroom, for example. And I believe that students must be they must have their roles, but they should not lead the classroom.
Okay. Okay, it's so interesting. We already tried to somehow to discuss some issues related to biology education or etc. But let's a little bit return back to education system in Slovenia, because it's really nice nice system as far as I know, because I visited Slovenia many times, and not I'm not expert obviously, but at least I have some understanding. It's obvious that every education system in each country faces certain challenges. Can you describe possible or mention some challenges, some current challenges, for example, you see today in your country?
Yeah, for sure. We have challenges, many challenges, but the question about every education system. It's about education system. It's like football. Everybody has opinion about football, and so everybody has can work as an honorary coach for a team. For example, the same is in education. Everyone knows something about education, and at the end of the day, nobody is really satisfied with it. But the question, I believe that we have the biggest challenge is because our goals are a moving target. We tried to solve this problem by inventing, let's say, buzzwords like 21st century skills, soft skills, and so on. But at the end of the day, the question is, for example, maybe your case or my case, you can find Slovenian, complete Slovenian grammar on the internet. You can find everything what you need, vocabulary, everything. I can find the same in Lithuanian. Why are then we chatting in English, not in Slovenian or Lithuanian? Because as it was assumed, it's a piece of cake to learn such language, because everything you have on the internet. Okay, we can choose a translator or whatever, but what's the difference? Then we can use also the third person sitting somewhere in translating our talk. So what I would like to say, I'm not sure that we are well prepared to answer the question what really we want from us as educators and from our students. Let's say, for example, if say, okay, now we are going to teach our students in first year of their school about measures to, let's say, save biodiversity or to prevent pollution or about. The question is, when they will be in a position to change anything. Some of them, let's say, if, for example, I'm not completely sure, but if you can become this constitutional lawyer only after you are 40, for example, and it's a long-term problem. What to do with them now to be able to solve problems of the future. And this is, by my point of view, the biggest unanswered problems. And we try to find a solution in, I say, in whatever based education, computer-based, problem-based, project-based, I don't know, art-based, whatever based to educate them. Okay, nice tries, but because probably in your country people are not generally satisfied with the educational system, probably.
Yes, obvious, because for example, I can mention that possible last 2 years and in particular last year, for example, we have quite I would say, quite big problem with math exam. I mean, Abitura exam after 12 years in after gymnasium, because results last year were not so good, really not so good, and previous 2 years ago the same. And now, for example, I think some weeks ago it was like test, like pilot exam, like testing was performed in different schools, and now we are waiting for this springtime and summertime for again math exam, and obviously we have some expectations that results will be better in comparison with previous year. But anyway, in general, the results are not so good. And for example, ministry at the level of Ministry of Education, and not only, we have continuous, let's say somehow continuous discussion what to do, how to change this situation, and different plans on progress, etc., etc. But yeah, it's really problematic, and not only, but for example, mathematics, the biggest concern, for example, in Lithuania.
I'm not sure about mathematics, but I have a good recipe for you in Lithuania. Lower your expectations.
Andrej, but by the way, in the context, I can mention that in previous discussion, I also shortly mentioned this. Usually we are speaking about education, let's say, and it doesn't matter in general about education like something positive, only, etc., etc. But for example, education can be organized in a negative way somehow, at least from our understanding. I'm not going into political details, but we see currently today, for example, in Russia, what is going on in education system, and how they organizing different training with all the students from junior age, from young age to older. They're just preparing for military activity in general.
Happily enough, we are a little further away from the Russian border, so it's Slovenia in this case has.
But I would say it's not.
I know.
Yeah, it's not education for peace or peaceful, sustainable life, but education for war, and it's really dangerous. I mean, this is my idea that education can act differently in not only in positive way, but
completely agree with you. For example, let's say. People working for war or for military can have the same academic degrees and were, let's say, on the same faculties or on the same as them who are working for peace or for I believe that and then we came to this let's say part of attitudes and so on, which is a lot of time for gotten from our curricula. For example, let's say many of our curricula are let's say are very technical, for example, and but then comes a problem of values. Then what values, whose values, what with let's say opinions which are not in the mainstream and so on. So I believe hard tasks, but most of the time people who make decisions are already out of the schools. That's the problem, for example, and I believe that we have a problem how to educate people who are not a part of the school system. In the school system, okay, they are young, they can, uh, you can influence them, you can influence them also for, there can be a long-term influences, but in reality, our students do not make decisions. That's I believe, and I believe that one of the challenges of education can be how to make decisions which are ethical by some standards, and so on. At least if you are going to do something wrong, that you will feel bad at all if you are doing something. That's, but okay, now we are out of our fields of expertise, and maybe on more general fields, and we are talking, I believe we are talking about topics, maybe we see general guidance, but you really don't, but at least me, I'm not sure how, right? I know why, right? Maybe I know what, but I'm not for sure how to do it.
Let's a little bit again continue with, you mentioned shortly already about digital education, and nowadays it's really, without any doubt, it's important, and obviously in the future, because for at least for 3 years we are working mainly online as educators, for example, and let's say we renewed online education in a new mode, in emergency mode, because some challenges related to COVID pandemic, etc., etc. But anyway, about digital skills, I found on some European Union report that okay, digital skills are integrated into school education, and digital skills of young people in Slovenia are better than European Union average. However, it was mentioned that gaps between girls and boys in schools are much higher than the European Union average. Can you comment on this? Why some gaps exists?
I don't want to make stereotypes, but I will make one. I believe that in these ages, girls are simply smarter than boys.
It's interesting position.
Yeah. And for example, but let's say we make some studies about online behavior and so on. Right? The first, we just have in one paper in some phases of review processes, not to talk about details, but the final conclusion of the paper is that anywhere, anytime, education is just a myth. Because what can be done, it simply cannot be done anytime, anywhere, because of several limitations. For example, you can make a quick search on your mobile phone. Yes, if you have access to the internet. Without access to the internet, you can make a photo and nothing more. Maybe you can find a position of GPS, nothing more. Then you can say, okay, anytime, anywhere. For example, you cannot access internet points. Then if you can access internet points, the question is quality of the connection. The quality of the connection is, and we have, let's say, white patches without any connection to the internet. And people live there. Let's say, not to talk about Australia or some, let's say, Africa or South America, so on. It's not. And then even if you have access, let's say with a mobile phone, you cannot make most of the tasks on it, which are normal part of education. Try to prepare an essay on your mobile phone. Mission impossible. Make a decent statistical calculation. For example, you cannot use spreadsheets like Excel forms, and most of the programs working okay on Windows and upper are simply not available on Android. But you can play all the times, for example, and so on. So for let's say these mobile phones, yes, they can work in some situation, but they do not offer anytime, anywhere possibility. Then is the next level can be, let's say, portable computer. Yes, excellent thing. If you can charge it, right? For example, okay, you can use them for several hours if they're expensive one. If you are, they are, let's say, in a range available to everybody. For example, the battery lasts hour, 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. It's not anytime, anywhere, any more. And we prepare some studies in these online environments. Students really suffered. But okay, it was a special situation during the pandemic and close-ups and so on. And I believe that this social part of education is even more important than maybe learning some facts or procedures to, let's say, working with others to communicate ideas and so on. These are all of them are on the top of 21st century skills or competencies, if we are going to earlier frameworks, for example. And let's say it's very important to teach students to work with. But I believe that it's, for example, like teaching them computer programs. It can be very important. But I believe that it's more important computing without computers, to teach them logic. Then you can transfer logic of, let's say, Boolean operators or whatever are. Then you can they can apply this logic later in new program languages. Like for example, in my time, There was maybe Pascal, there was Fortran and several others. Now people are talking about Python in statistics, about R and so on. But behind of them, you can see the same logic. And I believe that we are missing teaching them logic.
Oh, I fully agree with you but you know that again, I am following my my main general line that quite often we are discussing and talking only about some modern things, relatively modern. For example, you mentioned about logical thinking, that we need to promote logic thinking, etc. But currently it's so fashionable to speak only about creativity, creative thinking. We should be creative. But how it's possible to be creative without knowledge, without, as you mentioned, logical thinking, systemic thinking, for example, etc. The next, it's you again mentioned many times about this next so fashionable thing to speak about 21st century skills. And because I'm reviewing every day different papers, and I approximately in every paper you can find a lot of such expression. It's so fashionable to start your, for example, introduction with 21st century skills. And if you're raising the question, what does it mean? Is it logically or reasonable to speak about whole century? Only 23 years passed. How it's possible to predict skills for whole century? This is, at least, my concern. Maybe you can comment on this.
Yeah, I can comment. It's simply impossible. Look at old postcards or something like from the end of the century, like what was predicted for the future. For example, there was a meme on the internet, maybe Facebook probably. For example, in one of Star Trek's happening in 2200 and something, she is offering to the captain a clipboard, right? Classic clipboard, for example. You cannot, you try to transfer what you know to the future. Sometimes you can be right, and sometimes you are completely wrong. And so that's why I'm all the time read a Hitchhiker's Guide to the University, and then you can recognize some of the future technologies in it, like this Hitchhiker's Guide. It's like something. Now we can compare it with ChatGPT when it's near to through, right? But not completely through. Right? And how can you be sure? Right? That's the point. But let's say about it's a fashionable word, but at the moment we don't have better, right? Because let's say, okay, in 2000 or so we speak about competencies, and then you can recognize the similarity with 21st, because I'm a little bit older and I can recognize the things are reinvented and tried to be sold under with different vocabulary. The same old what was known, from example from Comenius is now became something digitally, whatever. But at the end of the day, okay, it's a fashionable word, but we can say, okay, is it important or is it not important? Let's say for me, for example, I can see, for me, for example, now we are communicating, and we are communicating foreign language. Is it important to know one or more foreign languages, or at least be able to get some information or knowledge? For example, I don't, most of the greetings used by majority of population, what population, I simply cannot recognize meaning in Chinese, Japanese, I don't know, in Coptic, and I don't know how many of different this, we say, abeceda, right, are there, right, for example, and you cannot learn all of them simply. Which one? But it's important thing to communicate. And now I believe that it's really important. Now it will become very important thing. Not only what to ask, how to communicate with these new technologies. For example, how to communicate with them, because on the questions there can be a problem with answers. If you are not precise in questioning, you will not get precise answers, and so on and so on. So, but I believe that okay, we can take it as a word, but maybe it became maybe Vincentas. We can start to introduce with this talk. Let's say 22nd century skills, right? Because the question can be, oh, what of these lists of skills will be still important in 22nd century? And then there was one, I don't remember reference. It was something like that Maslow comes before Bloom.
But it's already futuristic future and futuristic education. Yes, as I said, we can start to discuss about 22nd century skills. Why not? And this is, let's say, a large room for discussions, for papers, etc., etc. Okay, let's return a little bit back and continue to have a discussion on education system. Anyway, again, based on this report I mentioned previously, it is stated that Slovenian school students attend schools that are better digitally equipped in comparison with European Union average. But digital policy, I mean state policy and support are weak. The question is why?
Money makes the world go round, because money makes the world go round, because you can spend all money on new technologies. For example, let's say, remember these interactive whiteboards. For example, interactive whiteboards, they simply gone. They emerge, and at the end it was realized that I believe that side effects were too large. For example, side effects, and maybe they can be fashionable for presentation or for marketing at fairs, or to make presentations to the groups, but not to the classroom. simply they didn't work, and huge amounts of quantities of money were simply spent for them without, let's say, comparative what works for teachers. Let's say PowerPoint and a Beamer, because it can be used on any platform, right? You can transfer them from a classroom to classroom. For example, in an average school, you will need 25 or more such boards. They are simply dead end, like it was this Skinner's learning machines that and so on. And I don't know what will come. Let's say you were already on some fairs. We can see all the time. We can see some fashionable things like tables, digital internet tables. There, the students are going to stay around these tables and connecting puzzles and so on. So I'm not completely sure that everything what is offered will work, but I believe the things should be tested. And as for now, as I know, there were not so many things which survive this struggle for survival in educational system. For example, we are hard users of digital technology, but I see a background of your office, and you can see background of my office. Both are full of papers.
Yeah, and in possible my last question in this part, because obviously there are a lot of items, interesting items to be discussed, but our time, as usually, is limited, and it's not possible to discuss everything. And again, it's quite interesting. By the way, it's quite interesting because, for example, it's like a statement in this report that Slovenian teachers are confident of their ICT skills, but do not use them much.
Yeah, because
again, it's like a contradiction. They're quite confident, however.
No, it's smart. For example, it's smart. They're completely smart. If you can make more with less, for example, if I can, let's say, if I can write a circle on somewhere, there is no need to use hard technology to do it, for example. And the question is about teacher preparations. There are humans. At the end of the day, they are humans. Even if they are not taken as humans by some, they will be brutes. But the question is how much time you are prepared to spend for preparations. For example, if at the end of the day is knowledge. And for example, and the question is, are you trained to success on the tests? And it seems that our students are well trained to pass PISA exams because they are good in PISA, or above average in PISA. They are above average in TIMSS, for example. They are above average in digital skills and so on. So it seems that they are trained well in what is expected to do. And now the question can be if they will be asked differently. But I'm not talking about only my students. about your students as well, or still European students. For example, before you mentioned creativity. Creativity exists in many forms. For example, it's something because you can, in creative way, you can solve problems, well-defined problems. You can produce numbers of in divergent way, a number of solution, but a number of solution, and one way of creativity is to be able to adapt things, not only creating but adapting.
Right. I just remember because a few weeks ago I had my lecture with students, master students, on research methodology, and lecture topic was mainly focused on descriptive statistics, some simple descriptive statistics, descriptive analysis, and I mentioned the movie because recently I again watched again and again from time to time. It's quite interesting movie. I believe that you know this, Hidden Figures. This is so interesting movie about approximately 1950s, 60s, South African black ladies mathematicians working in agency, NASA, and calculating different parameters, and how, again, not only technology, but how creativity works, how creativity is important, not standard, not traditional understanding of different things, etc., in order to calculate different parameters, etc. It's a very interesting and quite good movie, Hidden Figures. Okay, Andrej, it's really nice. We finished our first part, and we have some more or less general background and on different educational issues. Let's focus on our next part. Possible it's not only your, but it's also my topic, biology education. And it's really interesting and important, mainly having in mind, again, fashionable context, so-called STEAM. Because today, if you are not speaking about STEAM or STEM education, you are not fashionable, you are not modern, and and possibly you have another opinion. Never mind. We will discuss shortly. But let's start from biology in general, because biology and biology education is one of your key topics. Can you briefly describe it?
How can I describe biology? In biology, I believe that this is one of the last large disciplines, because it's so wide, because biology has many problems, maybe not known to some of the teachers or scholars in other disciplines. Our main problem is that we should work, and we must work on different organizational levels. For example, chemistry 8 ended at chemistry level. For example, the level of atoms, molecules, chemical reactions, and so on. But at the end of the day, this in biology, in reality, we start when one discipline ended. Not to talk about physics, for example, or mathematics. Mathematics can be symbolic. Sometimes they even don't work with real objects. And for example, I like to say, in mathematics, I can say, let's define a group of elements S by whatever. As real numbers or whatever. In biology, okay, let's define a group of humans as Okay, and then came another level, right? From system theory, our elements from previous level don't behave in an exact way as the other levels. For example, molecules behaving okay as molecules make molecular complexes. For example, cell membrane or something like this, or ribosomes. They are complex assemblies of molecules. Think just about one hemoglobin with these hems coming from one point organic chemistry with proteins from completely some other part of organic chemistry and iron from anorganic chemistry assembled together, working as a unit, for example. And then these molecular complexes assembling originals, for example, and this level behaviors are completely different. Not to talk about one cell, multicellular organism, for example. Is now we are talking about individuals, and we are talking about not only, let's say, about 100, maybe with these artificial elements, 120 entities of chemistry. We are talking about nobody knows how many entities, because we simply don't know number of species, for example. And every is different, and biology is from bacteria to human, or let's say bat or bird or whatever is. If all the wonders from Edinburgh, for example, and this is only one. And then there are interactions, right? Nameless interactions, and the biggest challenge is not to teach students what is happening at one level. For example, like say, okay, we have organs, named organs or organic systems. But for example, what is a connection from, let's say, chemical level, for example, in the human, to thinking, right? Let's say brains. At the end of the day, brains are a bunch of organic molecules, but working in I don't know. I don't want to use, but it's a miraculous way. For example, we are living in our bodies, for example, and so on. And this is the biggest problem. I've been writing an article some years ago about students which are completely not able to transfer what was learned on one level to the other level. For example, let's say cell division. What has cell division with reproduction, and let's say what is reproduction with some other forms of behavior. That's the point. The worst problem, I believe the biggest problem, and I believe that biology is fastest of all disciplines at this moment. For example, let's say we are talking about gene editing. Every day there are new, let's say, fossil findings. Okay, we are more or less sure about the basic trajectories of evolution, but not in details, for example. And this is the problem, cumulative knowledge, and the knowledge is not only added, but the new knowledge is replacing the older, right? All the time. This is, let's say, biology is very dynamic, And at the end of the day, because we live in our bodies as humans, we are a cause of such things as described in Anthropocene. And then you came to this sort of connections with many other disciplines which are not science disciplines. We are talking about social scientific issues, let's say, I believe until 1809 or something like this, psychology was a part of biology. Now it's a separate discipline and so on. But let's say, and then we have problems how to transfer. And what is and the other thing that teachers get heavy burden from others, let's say from society. For example, in biology, part of the biology is health education. Health education is by no mean biology, okay? But became, let's say, behavioral things like drug addiction and so on. They are all became of biology. Now biologists must teach about environmental protection, environmental whatever is, and so on. And it's more and more and more, but the corpus of hours, lesson hours, stay almost the same. And now we have a bigger problem, what to eject from our curricula. For example, in the name of these new disciplines like molecular biology, it's very important. Nobody said.
For example, we performed some studies, obviously not so large studies, but anyway, more or less representative studies with teachers, in-service teachers and also with the service teachers, science teachers, and including primary school teachers. For example, on their knowledges in different areas of let's say, science education or biology in general. For example, genetics, microbiology, nanotechnologies, etc., climate change, knowledge, or their, let's say, confidence in these areas not so high, based on self-evaluation. For example, mainly primary school teachers, they are quite confident in more or less environmental protection, some environmental work, outdoor activities, etc., for example, but not so confident with areas I mentioned. They feel not so confident. And for example, my possible next question, or just a common concern, again, we're speaking quite a lot, I mean, we in society, in academic, pedagogical, educational community, about literacy, different types of everything. Approximately everything is literacy: health literacy, science literacy, scientific literacy, geographical literacy. The same based on the knowledge, obviously, biological literacy, or etc. And recently I reviewed one paper related to geographical literacy, and it was an interesting statement that geographical literacy is very, very important in global world or globalized world. Do you see some analogy with biological literacy?
Really, literacy, and as I understand the word literacy, I mean, for example, I can say I believe that I'm quite literate in Slovenian language as my mother tongue, for example, but I never wrote a novel. For example, I believe that writing a novel is at the moment out of my capacities. And, okay, maybe I didn't try it before. And I believe this is, by my point, this distinction between literacy and competency. For example, I see it's different. For example, literacy does not to be literate about something does don't make that you can do it. Like, for example, I can be, let's say, financially literate, so I know about money, or for example, and so on. But this does not make me competent for, let's say, speculation with stocks. Right, but I can be quite, for example, in geography. For example, I can probably, if exists, I can by means of the internet and so on. Probably I can find any town, village, or everything described or anywhere on the globe. Without say, okay, does it make it me competent to visit it or to change something about this? And so in this case, sometimes we are talking about literacy, like environmental literacy and so on. I believe about this term literacy, meaning not to do something, but to able to talk with someone, or let's say we can take let's say about maybe something about chemistry, something about physics, maybe something about biology. However, at this moment, I am not prepared to let's say to catch a snake, for example. And one Australian, for example, don't ask me even if I'm a biologist to catch green or black mamba. No, it's out of my literacy skills.
Yeah,
and that's it. Because I believe that we are using these terms too loose, and in this case, okay, we have too many literacies. Okay, literacy. What does it mean? To be able to read, to be able to catch the main messages. For example, but at this point, I can find on the internet or some databases a lot of articles which are out of my understanding, not because I'm illiterate, but because I don't have enough knowledge to understand it. Not to say that only this physics of matter or beginning of the universe or the molecular interactions and something like that. Simply, I can read them, but without understanding.
Okay, let's continue on this issue because as researchers, both of us, we know very well that, for example, researchers conducting many different studies in science education and in particular in biology education in particular. And this is really sadly that much education research is ignored by teachers or unknown by teachers. And the results of our research are largely unknown to, for example, policymakers, teacher educators, administrators, etc. And the most importantly for teachers, because teachers, they are really let's say, the only individuals in a position to apply research results. I mean, to implement in real practice. And do you agree with this, or do you have some another opinion?
No, I have an opinion. We don't have a service to the teachers. Service to the teachers to get digests. For example, if every day about, let's say, several 100,000 scholarly articles are published, for example, it's simply not possible. If you are at the top of curiosity or whatever, you can skim some of them, let's say, through the titles, some of them through the abstracts, but it's impossible to read them all. And for example, in these changes, I'm sure that today, or this week, we can find at least 5 to 10 seminal papers, for example, on in evolution, which can be game changers in teaching, for example. And for one teacher, for example, a teacher in upper secondary school, because I believe that they are the last keepers of general knowledge, because you have to know everything from, let's say, bacteria to universe, and so it's simply, and they don't get service, for example, and maybe this is one of my fears, right? That they are going to use chatbots, for example, to get instant messages from them, instant messages, and but as I don't blame chatbots that they are in some parts wrong. Okay, and know a lot of people who are going to give me a completely wrong advice, or I can give someone completely wrong advice. So the same is, but for example, now you have you are going to have a convenient partner for conversation. Now you can ask, okay, please, provide me what are latest findings in, let's say, STEM education. Then you are going to get a list of them, ignoring all the others, and now you can be satisfied with the answer or not. And I believe the teachers is simply, and now they have another problem. They learn from their textbooks, and these textbooks are most of the time are outdated, in some elements completely wrong, sometimes there are partial truth, and so on. So I will not blame teachers too much, but let's say, right? I believe this is life as it is, but the question is how to improve this. It's I believe out of my competencies. For example, let's say teachers simply don't read articles like we are preparing for them.
Yes, I think that somehow it's not only it's relevant not only for, let's say, biology education. It's in general it's I think the deepest problem how to transfer, let's say, scholarly knowledge or scientific knowledge to school practice in general. For example, how to transfer, how to make this bridge between academic world and real pedagogical school practice. Quite often, just we as scholars working, for example, in small or larger groups with different studies, different projects, but mainly in relation to our personal interest, and with little attention or little consideration for the importance for practice. And this is the biggest concern. And in addition, we feel, let's say, the biggest pressure that we need to, for example, to publish and to work globally. Not just for school practice, but just to publish in international journals, for example, etc., etc. Generally, it's not relevant for practice.
Okay, the question is, for example, right? Maybe there can be also some blame also on journals sometimes, because some of them still reproduce ideas which were recognized by the others, like neuromyth, for example. For example, let's say, I can all the time find in recent journals that someone is starting with left-right brains, or articles about learning styles are published all the times. Learning styles, there is no such things as, okay, it can be something general, but nobody fits exactly in one learning style. And then the question is, there are many kinds of motivation, for example, and let's say, I believe that in education, this, let's say, internal or intrinsic motivation is a little bit overrated, for example. I'm not completely sure, but if I'm right or wrong, but all the time, for example, you can read about things like that we are using only 10% of brains and so on in scholarly articles, for example, and so on. And the question is, and some of the methods used and sold for big money, for example, are questionable. For example, they maybe work somewhere or in some, but you cannot generalize them to whole education or all educational fields and so on. So, but I believe, let's say, remember, I will say about these whiteboards, right? At the beginning, big expectations, right? And then the peak of inflated expectations, and then dropping down, and they are used somewhere on public presentations or something. I will not say that they are unusable in all circumstances. No, they are somewhere, but they simply cannot be used everywhere in education. Let's say we talked before, this anytime, anywhere paradigm. For example, now, this online learning and so on, I believe that this COVID pandemic was, let's say, a big realization that online education simply cannot work for all. And online, we realized that we simply were not able to teach people hands-on skills online. And a lot of such things. And let's say that I believe we have this problem of overrating digital technology. Right? So it's okay. Now we are talking using digital technology. We can send emails. It became much easier to store.
Do you mean like overestimation of technologies in general?
Yeah, generally, and I believe.
Because, for example, my impression is that quite often, also in different contexts, we feel, teachers, also lecturers at university, we feel pressure that you need to use modern, remember this word, modern ICT, because it's fashionable. And the main focus is on technology, on instruments, generally speaking, but not on real teaching.
Okay, I'm not friend of conspiracy theories, so big friend of conspiracies, but one of I believe that in many of such issues is just a matter of business.
Yeah, education in general is big business.
Yeah, education is generally a big, huge business. And
the main question, what education for what life?
Good question. Give me a definition of good life, right? For someone, the definition of good life is to have peace and a quiet place, to be 20 hours behind the screen.
Yeah, and let's continue, because we mentioned already STEAM or STEM education, and as I mentioned before, it's nowadays it's really modern to speak about STEM education, but for example, obviously last century, when I worked on my PhD thesis, my topic was integrated science education. Do you see some real difference between integrated science education and STEAM education?
Yeah, I see big differences. Because integrated, what is the entity of integration? If the entity of integration a single teacher, then we are in big troubles. For example, because of professional skills, like in the biologist. If a part of biology, early biology education is to be able to recognize entities and objects in a world around you, and it's not enough to just to say, oh, it's a bird, but it's a black bird or something like this. You need a lot of professional skills at the general level. In the general level, what is a cause of most of the changes? Right? Oh, gravity. Right? And then say, okay, I can say that as a biologist, for example, but for example, I am not able to describe many things based on gravity, wave behavior, and so on, electricity, and so on. Right? And that means if there is one teacher, for example, let's say, then we get someone like modern Socrates with digital skills, for example. I believe it's not enough. It's simply not enough, because there are so many professional skills to be learned. For example, behavior in chemistry laboratory is a little bit different than behavior in a mathematical classroom. For example, in field work, maybe in biology and so on. And it can, I believe that by my opinions, I can be professional in some, but I'm a little bit, maybe I can be informed dilettante in the other fields, for example. Then say, okay, now we are going to talk about STEM. Right? What the B is STEM anyway? Is geology part of STEM? Probably yes, but it's not completely. For example, it's not anymore in most curricula. Right? For example, astronomy. For example, let's say astronomy. Okay, it became a part of physics by some historical reasons, more or less. However, let's say some of biological behaviors are influenced by sun. Sun is a part of what? Astronomy. Let's say, and it means I believe in setting good defined problems. For example, and I believe that science education or education, it was obsessed with inductive reasoning. Let's say from the parts making the big theory and so on. But I believe that we are all the time, we are working in deductive way. For example, you observe a phenomenon, and then we are in a deductive way of thinking, and then it came something like, okay, now we can explain the phenomena at a different level by professionals at the level of forces and so on by physicists, at the level of chemistry by chemists, at the level of biology by biologists, at the level of society by sociologists, and so on. That's what I'm when I think about integration, but not integration in a single person or in a single subject, even worse. But I believe that we should talk about maybe from different points of view, identify several key topics. For example, key topics, right? Me and my body, what I'm going to do with my body. For example, when I am chewing its physics, when I am swallowing and starts chemistry, when I'm using it for running and so on, it's biology, and so on. And I cannot find an idea of a single person with 6 or 7 faculty degrees. Right? That's my point. And the third problem is we are talking about induction. Okay, fine. let's say, synthesis. Excellent. But we are most of the time we are working in analysis, what's happening and so on. And we are forgetting for abduction. Abduction is ability to find the best possible solutions. And I believe I'm strictly, I'm strictly against integration of natural science, because natural in one subject taught by one person.
Yes, but okay, we can again we can discuss as long as possible in relation with STEAM. And as I mentioned, we can find a lot of papers, scholarly papers, other types of papers, discussions in relation to STEM. For example, in Lithuania, some years ago, we at state level, we launched quite a huge project, and 10 regional STEAM centers were launched in Lithuania, and one of them is in structure of our academy in Šiauliai, for example. And really, we are working quite good, quite effectively. But again, personally, I have some doubts with this approach. But never mind. On the other hand, we know that every science subject, at least main subject, for example, physics, biology, or chemistry, has some uniqueness as unique discipline. And what do you think, for example, about some possible problems and challenges that are unique to biology teaching and learning?
Yeah, for example, let's say we are the only who are talking about organizational levels above the molecular level. And the question is, that makes biology very, very complex. But this complexity, we need understanding of chemistry, we need understanding of physics. Now we see a bigger chemization of biology in the way of molecular biology, abandoning some traditional disciplines like botany, zoology, and so on as trends. But at the end of the day, what we want from our pupils, and I believe, let's say, I'm not against this STEM context. But the question is who coined the term. For example, engineering. We have technology education in our schools. For example, it's okay, but we simply don't have engineering education before high school or some vocational schools. Simply don't fit. But the question, the problem is a problem of mathematics, right? Because Americans find that they have problems with the supply of mathematicians, the STEM. I believe they coined these terms. Nothing wrong. Right? But and then we say, okay, our students. When somebody say, oh, STEM subjects are unpopular, and when somebody says, okay, just please make a review. And for example, biology, knowledge about human body is not unpopular. It's, in fact, is one of the few things in which students of all ages are really interested. And then we can say if somebody is not interested in, let's say, physics or orbital chemistry, it does not mean that he or she is not interested in, let's say, in dogs, house animals, plantings, gardens, and so on, which are all parts of living beings as objects of biology. So I can say in these studies, for example, let's say I found even let's say the best not targeting the right issue. For example, if I'm asking you, are you against let's say biotechnology or we found, right? Depends on case to case, right? And the people are generally not feared of GMOs, or they don't have a disgusting certain GMOs, but okay, they are against genetically modified, I don't know, salmons and so on. When somebody asks, right, a question, is STEM popular, unpopular? Well, which part of STEM? And we simply cannot say when we do it such research. We found mathematics, for example, it was not found as very popular, but it was regarded as very important. And let's say, for example, if something is popular, does not mean that people are not going to learn something. So, and let's say this can be really, really long issues about stems, but I believe, once again, I believe of this, let's say, old-fashioned natural sciences, like natural science. It can be also techniques, technology, and so on, as means of, as I already say, one part is about the world around us and us as well. What to do, right? And what is more important, right? How to behave, right? With this knowledge, right? And then we came to this soft, fashionable skills where we are a little bit less aware how to do it.
Okay, and then possible, because time is running quite fast, and possible my pre-last like a question or like a request, polite request, because you are well-known biology educator, scholar. At least I found on ResearchGate more than 1,500 citations to your work. It means that it's a good parameter and good indicator. Anyway, can you shortly mention, for example, for our also audience, for our viewers, some, let's say, topical or burning directions or issues in biology education research? What we need to do?
What to name? I believe that we should test, that we should immediately test a lot of claims which are believed to be self-evident, for example. And And I believe it is one of the most important issue. For example, right? The question is, the question is what works, right? What works, but not only what works, but what works for what, right? One issue in front. This is right, retesting, because we are all the times we are searching for novelties. Right? Okay, it's not a novel. Yes, but for example, citing at this moment, citing 20 years old papers on computers. Hey, think about computers 20 years ago, working with maybe with DOS, or even before on black and white screens, even before on green ones, and then we are referring to old. Okay, for example, I find all the time this citation. For example, Osborne, 2003. Hey, between 2003 is 20 years. In 20 years, what is new? For example, let's say, okay, historically speaking, right, is okay, but we should immediately some of these old should make new or let's say use same instruments on, let's say, on the similar groups in a large scales. And for example, that's first issue. And the second issue is how, by my opinion, how to prepare teachers to become, let's say, reflective practitioners, to make decisions on evidence. That's, I believe, that we have soft belly, for example. They are doing things for years and years and years without no effect or the same effect. Like teachers, researchers of their classroom, and to help them how to make such things public, not only in some hidden teacher conferences, but I believe this is. But let's say in biology didactics, we have real big problems. Just with one doctoral student, we found, right, all the time is we heard, let's say, that plants are boring, right? And we make a big research just to find, no, plants are not boring. School botany is.
Yes. Yeah. Andrej, it's I just again remember just listening your comment about the movie I mentioned, The Hidden Figures. I mean that generally the same concept or same things, it has different meaning depending on time and context. For example, in such a movie, Hidden Figures, versus written, for example, on the doors, on some room, computers. I asked my students, what does it mean, computer? It's a naive question. Computer, this machine, laptop, machine around you, this is computer. like device, like technical device. But computer, initial meaning, this is person who perform different calculations. People as computers, not machines. And only later on it was invented, for example, and also in this movie it's a good example when IBM just started to be invented. IBM. What does it mean, IBM? International Business Machine. Yeah, and programming languages, etc., etc. But my idea is that the same concept, the same thing has different meaning and different understanding. Let's say, for example, online education or distance or remote education. Let's say meaning 10 or 20 years ago, and the meaning nowadays, for example, how we do understand online or remote learning or remote studies, for example. It's different.
Yeah, but distant education is known from, let's say, I'm not completely sure, 18th century at least. Think about this chain of letters. For example, starting with chain of letters is distant or remote education. Has nothing to do. For example, and this distant education, it was well established before the time of computers. For example, you get some written materials or books and so on.
Yeah, for example, or radio, like in Australia, using radio, using TV, etc., etc. But currently we have a big mix of different things and different understandings. For example, mainly in relation to online learning, distance, remote, virtual. It's very easy to be lost.
No, it's very easy to be lost. I see, for example, when I'm preparing my reviews, for example, it simply means what keywords to use, for example, and new keywords emerge all the time, for example, and let's say, okay, go back to if we don't figure out that our only problem is terminology, and we have a little bit deeper problems. I believe that we have some other problems, and for example, let's say pencil and handwriting. Pencil and handwriting is very heavy and precise motoric activity, connection hand, brains, and so on. But I will say, in some, now I'm going to say, idiotic ways, that we can expel it from schools because all of them are going to use keyboards. But by my opinion, I believe I'm not talking about individuals or individual school system. Whoever says that handwriting is not important, I will say, is, in my opinion, an idiot. Okay. Regardless of the level it has in, say. However, it does not mean that parallel to handwriting must be learned also working keyboards.
Okay, and my last, not question, but just if possible, as a request, traditional. Possible you can, let's say, summarize, or just you want to comment on something what was not said, what was not mentioned. Possible we missed something important as last word.
No, it's my last word. I will be very short, right? We can continue this. It's very important to make to exchange ideas, to communicate them, and it's very important, by my opinions. Right? I believe we have a program. Right? Okay. I believe that the things must be published, because if they are published in any way, or in public depositories and so on, and even more important that sometimes we are all the times in a search for something what supports our claims or before. But now I believe that it's a time to start searching for studies reporting negative and neutral outcomes, not only positive ones. I believe that it's more important to test old claims, starting from the most important thing in education is rising internal motivation. Yes, no. Why? Evidence. If yes, okay, it's yes. If no, then it's no. Because we are all the time we have a burden on our backs. For example, computers are going to improve education. Not necessary. Somewhere yes, somewhere not. Mobile phones are bad. Somewhere yes, somewhere not. And if there is finding something against, right, the main knowledge, I believe it's very important to be reported. That's my final work, and to the all right, research, and publish it. That's my opinion.
Okay. As I mentioned, really time is running quite fast, and possible we have something more to discuss and some interesting issues. For example, in relation to teacher education as my also favorite topic, but possible we will postpone to the next, our next discussion in real or online. Who knows? But I think that communication it's quite useful and quite important and quite relevant. Mainly if we have some possibilities, including technical possibilities, as for example to discuss online, etc. And I believe that some interesting ideas anyway it will be possible to find in our discussion. And thank you very much for this great discussion, and for taking your time to have such a discussion, such a good conversation. And obviously I wish you to continue to be active, to be active in your scientific and academic activities, in your personal life. And good luck to you.
Vincentas, thank you for offering me to express some of my ideas, and what to say, just to say, hello to everybody who is going to survive our interview.
Thank you very much, Andrej, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.